Welcome to Nameless Debate Radio, where radioactivity is contagious. You can join us in broadening our minds on the Nameless Debates Discord via the link below and even feature here yourself, if you've got what it takes.
Do we have any topics in mind for this discussion, or are we just gonna riff?
Alternative law of identity, baby. Law of identity 2.
Law of Identity V2, you mean?
No, law of identity 2.
Oh.
We thought the first one was so good we made a sequel.
That's pretty funny. You should make a meme about that, dude. Like, if the Law of Identity is so good, why is there no Law of Identity 2? There is now!
Are we recording?
We are recording.
Okay.
Maybe we could start off with the topics that you and I were talking about, having a discussion about.
Can I start off with a few quotes from Wittgenstein?
Sure. Mhm.
That way, it might ground it.
Do you want to quickly do me a favor, Joshua, and adjust? So this might be a difficult instruction, but I want you to go into settings, voice and video, and you should see a bar that says input sensitivity, right? And it's got a toggle that says automatically determine. Turn the automatically determine thing off and move the bar backwards a bit.
Okay.
Because essentially it's a noise gate. I'm assuming you know what that is.
Yep.
Yeah.
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, it seems better, yeah.
Okay. Good. Sounds good. Let me. If an elementary proposition is true, the state of affairs exists. If an elementary proposition is false, the state of affairs does not exist. If all true elementary propositions are given, the result is a complete description of the world. The world is completely described by giving all elementary propositions and adding which of them are true and which false.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah. If an elementary proposition is true, the state of affairs exists. If an elementary proposition is false, the state of affairs does not exist.
But
That sets up.
Is still true.
What's that?
What do you...
So it does not exist, but the statement is still true.
Yeah, this statement as a statement of its own existence is true.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah,
is the
correct.
definition of an elementary proposition?
Well, it's a proposition, which is a proposition is a statement of truth or falsity in relation to existence. So you're making a true or false proposition.
Well, technically, a proposition
in relation to a fact of existence.
Technically, a proposition is inherently a claim about truth.
That's right.
Yeah, a claim about truth, specifically in relation to the prior axiom.
Well, yes, and
The
it
first
has a
axiom
relation-
itself cannot be a truth claim. Because because the truth of the second axiom is defined relative to the first.
I agree. Wittgenstein gets into that quite deeply, and he says things that are not, I would say, easy to understand, but he says a tautology. One of the things he says is a tautology doesn't refer to the world, and a contradiction doesn't either.
Interesting.
Another way of saying what you just said.
A tautology doesn't refer to the world, and a contradiction doesn't either.
Correct. Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Why is it that...
I'll read another one that deals with this. Among the possible groups of truth conditions, there are two extreme cases. In one of these cases, the proposition is true for all the truth possibilities of the elementary propositions. We say that the truth conditions are tautological. In the second case, the proposition is false for all the truth possibilities. The truth conditions are contradictory. In the first case, we call the proposition a tautology, in the second, a contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
Propositions show what they say. Tautologies and contradictions show that they say nothing. A tautology has no truth conditions since it is unconditionally true. and a contradiction is true on no condition.
That's really interesting.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting. I thought it would jump us to another. The key proposition, which is interesting, is the idea that a proposition is a claim in relation to the true state of affairs. That these state of affairs have to exist in order for the proposition to be true. Now, it's actually another level of discourse. So it's the meta discourse is that meta to that, you can make a claim about the proposition itself. Something that I think he doesn't completely recognize is that you can make statements about the proposition, and that's another, it's a meta layer of truth values.
Mm-hmm. So, if a tautology does not refer to the world, right, then is the world not itself a tautology?
Yes, I think the world is a tautology. I think the idea is, and he makes this sort of clear, that a tautology can't equal a world for practical reasons.
Does he mean like...
Now, Bateson makes that case.
So I guess I'm trying to wonder, right, because you said the thing that I agree with, which is that the world is a tautology. But to say then that a tautology does not refer to the world, it seems like we're distinguishing between like a tautology in reasoning and a tautology in identity.
Not really. I think there's actually a logical problem. And Bateson talks about that in the essay From Steps to an Ecology of Mind, that in order to have a completely described tautology, you'd also have to describe the tautology you described. And then that turns into an infinite problem. It's a problem that can't be resolved. So therefore, a tautology you project cannot be equal to the tautology of the world. So they're not the same thing.
That doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't refer to the world, though. It doesn't have to be completely equivalent in order to make coherent reference. But it seems like in this statement, he says a tautology categorically does not refer to the world.
I think this is the perfect place to touch on the thing that I was talking about yesterday, which is that I would say that the tautology is equivalent, but they are not identical.
Yeah. It's equivalent.
Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
So if something is identical, it has both the same structure and the same value. If it is only equivalent, it only has the same value.
Only has the same what?
Value. But not the same structure.
And so your argument about a tautology is that it can be what, equivalent or identical?
I would say that it is equivalent, but it is not identical.
Okay, I probably accept that, but that's a reference.
I would say it's equivalent to a degree. It's always to a degree.
The value, they are both equal. They are both equivalent to big T, but they do not have the same structure.
I think, Joshua, that's implicit in the distinction he made already, right? Because if you say there's
maybe.
If you say there's a distinction between equivalence and identical, right, then it implies that equivalence is not complete, I think.
Yeah.
But I think what I would like to ask, given that, right, is that even though I agree with that, right, that seems to be a reference, right? That seems to be a link between the tautology and the world that is denied by Wittgenstein in this statement here, right?
Not quite, but it sounds like it is being denied.
Could you explain that?
The problem with Wittgenstein is he can be rhetorical, so that confuses people.
Okay.
So I would say
the truth conditions. The truth conditions of a proposition determine the range that leaves it open to the facts. A proposition, a picture, or a model is in the negative sense like a solid body that restricts the freedom of movement of others, and in the positive sense like a space bounded by a solid substance in which there is room for a body. A tautology leaves open to reality the whole, the infinite whole of logical space. A contradiction fills the whole of logical space, leaving no point of it for reality. Thus, neither of them can determine reality. Now, then he says in any way, and that's where the problem is. That's not true. It's not true to say it in any way, but that's what he says. And later, he's embarrassed by this book. Later in his life, he's sort of embarrassed because he makes statements that are he overplays his hand a little bit, and he doesn't even like that.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
Sure. I said you said he makes statements that are little, and I suggested too confident.
Yeah.
Could you just to make the conversation progress a bit more smoothly? When you're reading a quote, do you mind, presuming you're reading it on your computer and not out of an actual book, do you mind copy pasting it into commentary? I tagged you in the channel.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
It's a great
Just
idea.
so, because it's easier for us to all reflect on it when we don't have to listen to every single word you say.
Yeah, and I would say that the reason that he would not draw the link between the tautology and the natural world is that they aren't actually directly linked. So they're only indirectly linked through big T. So only big T is identical to big T, and a tautology is equivalent to it's not, well, the tautology is related to big T, and the natural world is related to big T, and so you can only say they are related insofar as they are both related to big T.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with that. Did you guys get the quote? Did I put it in the right chat list? Not sure which one.
I tagged you in it. Do you not know how to recognize tags?
I didn't see it.
Okay,
Maybe
so
I was too busy. I was probably on.
So what it does is
the browser.
if you scroll through the channels, right, one of them should have a little red 1 or a red 2.
Oh, there's one with a 2. The commentary.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's called tagging. If it comes up with a little red thing, that means you've been mentioned specifically.
Okay. Oh yeah, there you go. Okay.
Thanks for that.
There's another one I wanted that's connected to this talk.
Mm-hmm.
Did you
I'm
get
just
this
trying
book
to
from
find it.
archive.org?
Actually, I can tell you where I got it. I can give you a link. Actually,
It looks like someone has done text, like image to text translation on it.
that may be the case actually, because it's from a PDF.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's actually, I don't know if it's doing image to text. It may be, but I think what it's doing is when I paste it, it doesn't.
It's not grabbing the formatting properly. That's what's happening.
It's not grabbing
Yeah.
the formatting properly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's I think I sent the PDF that I'm referring
Yeah,
to.
you did. Yeah.
And I'm in the 4s. So if anybody sees something that where is it? Like I say, some of what he says is rhetorical and confuses people because he likes to say clever things, and which I sort of admire because I like the poetry of rhetoric, but he confuses it with accuracy, I think.
Interesting.
He underestimated the problem of language, and he underestimated the problem of language and reality when he wrote this, which is something that I think we all do.
Yes, I think it's almost impossible not to underestimate it. Could you give some more examples of like rhetorical flourishes he uses?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he gets ridiculous in some of these. I mean, I agree with some of it. Here's an example. I mean, I admire it, and I'm not so sure. I'll let me just copy and post it before I read it, so everybody can just read it as well. Philosophy aims at the logical clarification of thoughts. Philosophy is not a body of doctrine, but an activity. A philosophical work consists essentially of elucidations. Philosophy does not result in philosophical propositions, but rather in the clarification of propositions. Now, that's already, is it really binary when he uses rather? Isn't it both? You know what I mean?
Yes, I agreed.
Without philosophy, thoughts are, as it were, cloudy and indistinct. Its task is to make them clear and to give them sharp boundaries. That part is fine. But then he goes on, and he gets
Just
more
quickly,
ridiculous.
I'd say at the end of the sentence, right, that last bit,
Yeah,
he, like, you can see the affirmation of the production of propositions, right? Because giving them sharp boundaries is how you get the proposition to begin with. Before that, it's just an idea.
that's right. I agree.
No, attributing value to the underlying structure is how you get a proposition.
Oh, shoot. Now, here's one I disagree with, so which is right after the one I just pointed out. For instance, this one's I find annoying, but that's because he didn't really know a lot about psychology. And he goes, psychology is no more closely related to philosophy than any other natural science. That's nonsense. But he sort of saves it with this one a little bit. Theory of knowledge is the philosophy of psychology, which isn't quite true, and it could be regarded as true enough to disqualify the ignorance of the previous proposition. Does not my study of sign language correspond to the study of thought processes, which philosophers used to consider so essential to the philosophy of logic? That's true. Only in most cases they got entangled in unessential psychological investigations. With my method too, there is an analogous risk. So he sort of admits the problem, but he goes ahead and says it anyways, which I find odd because I don't think you can do philosophy without mind, and therefore a theory of mind is essential to doing philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And he seems to glide over this as though it's not true, and
Yes.
actually it's a mistake that so many people make.
I mean,
Have made in history.
I'm not sure that you actually necessarily do need it though. I think it helps. I don't think it's a strict requirement.
I think it is a strict requirement because unless you have some
Definitely.
knowledge of psychology, it's not possible to distinguish between a defense mechanism and an actual problem, right?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one example of them, but yeah, there's a whole language in psychological theory that deals with the inner phenomena, and then the interpretation of inner phenomena to signs. Right.
I think
That comes actually before philosophy. Philosophy comes after the signs. So psychology is dealing with the relationship between the hardware and the software, and
Mhm.
philosophy is already dealing with the software, and to some degree it's now recognizing that you have to have some skill in that relation in order to be able to do the higher level abstract thinking.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the first statement in that collection of statements is just wrong, right?
Yeah.
But it does seem like he doesn't quite understand psychology itself, right? To say that psychology
Yes.
is theory of knowledge is kind of right, but not really. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not really. And then he wrote a whole long paper on the idea of the unconscious being logical nonsense, which that is a joke.
Really?
Yes, you can see where logic can get you in trouble, because he simply argues that if it's unconscious, then you can't be conscious of it, so it can't exist. So I solved the problem.
That's a good one.
An excellent tautology there.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this I don't really quite understand right now. I have to say, this proposition,
Mhm.
although it sounds true, I'm not sure it's true. But maybe one of you guys can clarify this one for me.
I like just quickly before to the next statement. I really like how he almost admits to the problem with the method at the end, right? He says only in these cases they got entangled in unessential, although that's supposed to be inessential, psychological investigations, and with my method too, there is an analogous risk, right? That's an admittance to the potential problem.
Yes, he was good at that. He was good at realizing possibilities, but not necessarily measuring the probabilities quite right. So this is one. Propositions can represent the whole of reality, but they cannot represent what they must have in common with reality in order to be able to represent it. Logical form. Just don't get that. I would think that he would know that that's not completely true. In order to be able to represent logical form, we should have to be able to station
I think
ourselves with propositions somewhere outside logic. What's that?
I think that in when he says sorry, one sec. There are people talking in my background. It's incredibly confusing. All right, my bad. What was I gonna say? Okay, so it seems to me that what he could be trying to say is that they can't represent it completely, right? It's interesting that your objection was that's not completely true, because I think that the only way that that actually makes sense is if he is saying that it can't be completely represented.
Yes, I would agree with that. I didn't think that's what he was saying, but he
No,
is saying
I'm guessing, essentially.
I think you're right, because he says whole of reality. No, but then he says propositions can represent the whole of reality. But they cannot.
Yes, but I think what he means there is that they can represent. I think what he means there is that they can represent the whole substance, but they can't capture the form completely. And I think that comes down to like some sort of like, for instance, the regression to a meta language to qualify the axioms upon which your system is predicated, right?
That is what I think he's saying. Yeah, that is my guess. I just don't know why you use that language.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a translation thing.
Yeah, it could be, which might very well be. But I have to admit, I spend a lot of time with this book, a lot of time, and I used to understand it better than I do now. That's how bad it can be. I actually read my notes from the time I thought I understood it better, and I can't understand my notes.
Really?
Yeah. Go, what the hell was I thinking? I was really deep. I must have been really deep into it, because I can't quite make out what it is the distinctions I'm projecting in relation to his projections.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. So why do you think that the understanding has spoiled somewhat? Like, what would your explanation be for that?
Well, I think to understand he built a very coherent tautology in this piece of work. And to understand all the things he's pointing out, many of them are very subtle. And I think they represent a first in the history of thought around language and proposition. He managed to combine the beginnings of basically computer logic with language, and fairly successfully, probably one of the first ones. Yeah. So what I found was you have to get very fluent with his language, and what happens out of that is a new language starts to get formed in your mind, and you're thinking what's happened is that I'm not thinking at that level of abstraction anymore. It took a lot of practice. I actually read this book once a day for a few years, just to be sure that I understood it by rote, just to give myself a chance to formulate thoughts around it. I just thought that it was so well done that it was worth getting to know. And the strange thing about it was, even though I knew I had to learn it, I also knew it was wrong. So it was a funny double quality that it had. What I've noticed, there was a time where I believed in the whole idea that there should be another language, a perfect language that we should be using, and it was connected to the belief in Esperanto for a while. And after a certain amount, he believed that the language is imperfect. That was the problem. And then I started to realize that the language was perfect and that he was wrong in its own way.
an interesting thing about Wittgenstein is that I find he lends himself to misinterpretation, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Um,
it's the rhetorical things he says that take things out of the realm of preciseness and into rhetoric.
mhm. It's really interesting though, because I find I like to like offer some not just Wittgenstein, but I also have a couple of my favorite ones from Nietzsche, right? That I offer people and I ask them to deconstruct it, and you can get a measure for how philosophically inclined they are by how quickly they give up and settle for their answer, essentially, because it's obvious that you haven't quite got it just based on the fact that there are words you didn't understand. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
for
yeah,
you to go,
yeah.
I got the gist of it, it's kind of like it, like I said, it's revealing with regards to how practiced you are in philosophy.
I agree.
Hmm.
So what I like about his is basically this whole thing. I think it happens in the threes. Is he describes a picture theory? Let's see if I can find. Basically, what he tries to say is what propositions or a set of propositions show is a set of relationship between the signs that has some equivalence to the relationship between objects in the real world, and that's how a proposition describes a picture. And that's a very simple but important idea. It's a key
Could
idea.
you repeat that, sorry?
So a proposition or a set of propositions is a set of signs which define a set of relations between those signs. And those relations have a certain equivalence with objects in the real world, with the relations between objects in the real world. And that's how a proposition implies the world. So in that sense, I almost get the opposite sense of his proposition, which is all that we can show is the logical structure between the relations of our signs and the relations of objects in the real world.
Yes, but I
Apart
think
from that, that's all we can
I
assert.
agree with that. But I think it seems to me that he is speaking more transcendentally to the logical structure of the world, not the logical structure of our propositions, right? So we can like analyze the logical structure that we're using to represent the relationships in the world, but we can never capture those real world relationships completely because like language just isn't actually capable of that.
Yeah, but the other thing I always like to say is that this is a very popular thought, and what I find is that it has limited utility
Do you
because
mean the one I said about language not being capable of that?
yes,
Yes, I agree with you,
it's
right? Because
both.
I use that
Yeah,
in a very limited way, but I've had lots of people say to me, well, language is so incapable of capturing truth or logical form, let's say, that any propositions you claim to know are just unreliable. And it's like,
exactly.
sort of
Yeah.
like I know where how you're getting there, but it's just not true. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with you totally.
Mhm.
Because we both experienced the same thing. I've heard it so often that I go, okay, I have to always point out that there's more that you can say with language than you're actually doing, and that's really the challenge. Not the challenge is not to do what is impossible, but to do what is possible, and what's possible far transcends what we actually realize.
I think that's very astute.
So that was part of it, and so the picture theory I found really really interesting and really useful.
Hello.
Maybe it's two is where the picture theory.
No, I think it is 3. I've got 3.01. The totality of true thoughts is a picture of the world.
Yeah, there it is.
3.01.
3.01. Oh, there it is. Yes. I love this shit. I really do. A thought contains the possibility of the situation of which it is the thought. What is? I don't know what that was. That and he gets into the God thing, which is always a problem. I love that if a thought were correct a priori, it would be a thought whose possibility ensured its truth. I love these little
I don't think
circles.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think God is particularly problematic until you start trying to say it exists.
Yeah,
Like the idea
that's
of a
true.
God
The way
that
he's
doesn't.
saying it is not a problem. It's true.
No, but the idea of a God that doesn't exist makes perfect sense.
Well, I
Sure.
don't
In my
know.
opinion,
I
anyway.
mean, the idea of a god that isn't like representatively real outside of mental spaces, if that's what you mean, sure. But like,
No, okay. So through, like you could say that through God not existing, everything else exists relative to God. God is what does not exist.
God's not the only thing that doesn't exist though, and like that doesn't even like do justice to the
Are you sure?
ideas. It doesn't do justice to the ideas attached to God.
No, that's what I'm saying. So it's only when people start trying to ascribe certain properties to God that God becomes incoherent. One of those being
Well, but
existence.
there are certain properties which are undeniably part of whatever you would call God, right? Which is, for instance, the transcendent ground of being.
Yeah. So yeah, that's
I would say not
the.
existing is pretty transcendent, dude.
Matt will be back momentarily.
Well, check out this. That's one definition of God. That's Blake's definition of God, which is much closer to transcendent. How does one come to terms with that? And the thing is if you haven't ever experienced it, then you can't know what it refers to, and it actually represents the very same problem, which is that until you've experienced it, then you wouldn't know that this is not just a poem. This is an experience that this guy had. And I think what it refers to is the fractal nature of the universe. So he's had an experience of the fractal nature of the universe, that everything is embedded within everything, and that it's a series of embeddings at different scales of logic, right down to microscopic reality, which he can't perceive, but he imagines that it continues long past his scope of perception in both directions, the macrocosm and the microcosm. And then he's also having an experience of what appears to be a determinate relationship to the future and the past, that somehow he has seen that this whole fractal reality moves from the past to the present to the future in a determinate manner. And that for him is God. And for a lot of people, it actually is. This is the problem. This is if you want to deal with the problem on its real feet, then you have to deal with the whole problem. If you want to just if you want to deal with the problem by labeling it with poor definitions of the phenomena, then the problem is easy, but you're not really getting anywhere. What you want to do.
But I'm using a slightly different definition again, though. Like for me, everything which exists, and for it to be able to be said to exist, it must have a value, right?
Yep.
And another thing I believe is that the value of any proposition is defined, like comes from the things that is defined relative to. And a thing I said earlier in the conversation was I think that the first proposition cannot have a value because it is not defined relative to anything else. So, for me, the first proposition, if you were to have a model of God, for me, the first proposition is God. Since that does not have a value because it's defined not relative to anything else, God does not exist.
How do you know it's not
and
defined
anything,
relative to anything else? How do you know?
Because the only thing it could be
See,
defined
here's the
relative to would
thing.
be itself. It's either defined relative
what do
to
you think
itself or
about
it's not defined relative to anything.
Did you see the Blake poem?
I think so.
So to see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour.
Mhm.
Wow, that is lovely.
So he's referring to something in the real world. That's my claim. And he calls it God.
Yeah, but I'm referring to a different God. God, that is
Yeah,
what
but
God
why?
is to me.
I feel like what he means by in that poem, it seems like he's talking about the unity of being, right?
Yes.
Which obviously is something I agree with. I think Chris has
Yeah.
a slightly different conception, though.
Yeah, for me, when I'm trying to define God, I'm using the definition of like the first thing, the first cause, the thing that made all of the other things, right? And for me,
Okay.
the first cause itself cannot exist, but
Yeah.
through it not existing, it causes everything else to
That's
exist.
not called
Okay.
causality anymore, right? If
No,
something by not existing causes things, that is not a causal relationship.
How?
Because not existing cannot be causal, right? If the fact of
No,
its
no, no,
non-existence,
but it's there's a difference between
the word cause doesn't
ontological
apply.
existence, and the other definition of existence that we're generally using. Ontologically, the God point, that single first axiom which has no value, it ontologically does exist, but as
okay, you know
far
what
as
the
the
problem with
rest
that
of
argument
existence
is?
is concerned, it does not exist.
There
And it's
is a
the
problem
only
with the
thing.
argument.
What?
The problem with the argument is, what if God is the second thing? So now the
No,
first
but no,
point.
no, no, no,
Now
but
the
no,
first.
but
No, not. No, but no, it's relevant. It doesn't matter whether it's a third thing or the fourth thing.
no,
He's
no,
The
but my
argument
starting
only.
my starting axiom is that whatever the first point is, that is God.
Yeah, but
That
that
is how I
doesn't
But
defined God.
that
but
doesn't seem
no.
like
So
a
I say.
meaningful
So
statement.
what about my definition of uh, uh, God is the second thing? The
I'm
first
confused.
axiom
Can
is
I
not
just
God.
ask? Like that doesn't seem
Then
like
we're
a
referring
meaning.
to different things.
That doesn't seem like a meaningful statement to me, right? If what you mean by God is the first point, don't say God. Say first point.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, the first point that caused all of the other points to exist through it not existing. Fine.
Okay, but I don't think that. I personally think that if
That's
something
basically God, dude.
if something by virtue of non-existence, right, has as its necessary like alternative something that does exist, the thing that does not exist did not cause the thing that does. That is not how causes work, right?
Except
Something,
that is
the
that
fact
is
that
that is how the relationship works.
no, if you have two options and one of them is false, the other must be true, but the false thing did not cause the true thing. It didn't. And there's no way to say that it did. In fact, it is merely the exclusion of an alternative option that necessitates the truth of one of the options. It is not any kind of causality.
No. Okay, so no, but the the God point is f equals not f, right? And so if you say that that is true, then it immediately becomes false and everything stops. But if it starts out false and then becomes true, it causes everything else to become true.
And that might make sense if I accepted that reality conforms to constructor theory, but I don't, right? And so I don't
Yeah,
see.
fair enough.
So I don't understand how that like fits into my model, because my model is not. It doesn't require that dynamic construction step, right? Because I don't think that there's a link between what's not and what is. I think what's not just isn't.
Okay, so all structure just always has the value. There's no way to have a structure devoid of value, and there's no way to have a value devoid of structure. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically.
I agree
Okay.
with that. I think it does follow, and so
I think that you can have a structure devoid of value. I disagree.
I think what you're doing is rhetoric, and it's the same thing that Wittgenstein does, which is the rhetoric confuses you as to the logic. So on a logical tautological level, what you're saying makes sense, but it relies on assumptions, which
Okay, so I have a question. So you honestly believe that every structure has like a distinct value?
every structure in the real world has a value. Structure has value. That's something that people don't understand at first. So when you're very, very young and you're a baby, it's just content. You don't realize the structure has value. And as you get older, you start to realize that structure does have value. Structure of
No,
facts,
I
structure
agree
of
that
events,
structure.
cause and effect itself is a structural relationship.
I think all structure which exists has value, but structure
Okay.
which does not exist and can.
Yeah, but you can't
can
define
have-
that a
Wait a minute.
priori.
You can have structure that.
Wait,
Okay,
here's
I
the
will. I'll
objection.
do it right now. I'll do it
Wait,
right now.
can I
Are
offer
you
an
looking at
objection?
commentary?
Can I offer an objection? Right? To say of that which is not that it is false. To say of that which is that it is truth. Right? That is how we define what's true and false. If something is non-existent, it isn't there. If something is false, it isn't there.
But the structure, the structure is still there, even if it even if there is no dialogical manifestation of it in
I
existence, the
disagree with
structure
that.
fundamentally still
I
exists in an
disagree with that.
ontological sense.
I disagree with that. I think anything false
Okay,
doesn't.
so I have just managed to, in the real world, describe a structure which doesn't even ontologically exist. That's what you're saying.
No, it does. It ontologically exists in your mind and not further than that, right?
And
But
that's
the
what I'm
point
saying. You
is,
can have you can ontologically have a structure which does not have any
no,
values,
yes, that's
and
not.
it
That's
does
not
not exist
wrong.
until it has values.
Wrong. That's not it not existing. It exists in the mind of the subject, right? And there's no
Okay,
way.
if I say, like, fucking unicorn existence equals false, right? That
Sure.
statement is ontologically true. That structure is ontologically true. But as far as existence goes, unicorns don't exist.
Yeah, that's called representative truth. But I don't understand how you're linking that, right, to the other idea. Right, because I consider that to be coherent, right? You can say unicorns don't exist, and what you mean by that, right, is that unicorns don't exist in a mind-independent sense, and that statement, although it may ontologically be true, is representatively true, right? And then there is a way for statements that are all statements are ontologically true, but not all of them are representatively true, right? And that is the distinction that allows people to make false propositions, right? That doesn't mean falseness exists. It means humans can conceive of incoherent propositions. That's not falseness.
But those propositions ontologically exist.
But they're not false. That's the thing. They're incoherent, but they're not false.
Yeah, they don't have a value.
I disagree. That's not what incoherent means. Incoherent means they can't be evaluated. That doesn't
Because
mean
they
can't.
don't have
No,
one.
nope. That's not
Until
the.
you pin
That
until,
is
until
not.
you pin a value. Dude,
That
okay,
is
as
not.
soon
That's not the only reason that something can't be evaluated, dude. Something can have a value that, for instance, is cyclic. Then you can't evaluate it.
like as soon as you pin the values of the structure I provided, the rest of the structure takes on a value, and all of the structure has value. As soon as you pin some of the values to a distinct value, but until that point, the structure itself doesn't exist because it doesn't have values, even though it can be described. Until you attribute values to it, it does not exist.
If what you're saying is, if what you're saying is that until you have an idea, the contents of the idea don't exist, maybe I accept that, right? But I don't understand how you connect that to any statement about the actual state of affairs, because all you're talking about, right, is the difference between what subjects can think about the world and the way the world is. And you're saying that the fact that subjects can come up with propositions which aren't representatively true, right, indicates that falsehood exists in some ontic sense, and I disagree with that.
Okay, so what if I have the structure
Yeah.
B equals
I have to
A
agree
or
with
B? What if I have the structure B equals A or B, right?
Sure.
In itself doesn't have a value, right? You cannot evaluate it. It cannot be evaluated at all, right? Until A has a value. As soon as you say A is true, or A, like as soon as you do that,
I don't.
as soon as you say A is true.
Okay,
as soon
here's
as
the
you say
thing.
A is true,
The moment
B
you
equals
say
2.
A, it exists, right? So there's no time, this time that you're inventing, which is that we can see these statements and them not existing. That actually doesn't happen. So if you get really rigorous with what actually happens, what you have to say is, At one moment, I'm seeing the letter A. At the next moment, I'm seeing an equal sign. At the next moment, I'm seeing B. At the next moment, I'm seeing a plus. And the next moment, I'm seeing a C. And then say, well, you haven't seen them yet. That actually isn't even logical.
No. Okay. What I'm saying is, any structure which is true exists. Right. That's one of my axioms.
As soon as you give them a representational form, whether you give them other values or not, they already have value, and that's what you're not realizing.
No,
that's why I went over that.
So
you feel you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Could you rephrase it, maybe?
I don't feel you do.
Could you rephrase it, Chris?
I'm saying the moment that you see.
I was wanting him to like demonstrate an understanding of what you said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm typing. Okay, how do I do it? So.
I know what you're doing, and it's actually a common, let's say, mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Which is you're not respecting the fact that you read signs in time. So the moment that the sign appears, it already has a value. If it doesn't have a value, then it can't appear. If it appears, it has a value. That's all there is to it, and that's just basic cause and effect.
So this structure has appeared in front of you. Please tell me, what is the value of B? So let's say this definition of B always ontologically exists, right? So ontologically, B always exists, but
that's right.
Because B cannot be evaluated at the current point in time, B doesn't actually have the value true, therefore it doesn't exist, right?
No,
that's a mistake. I'm telling you.
That is a mistake. I agree. Right at the end where you say, "Thus it doesn't exist," that is an error.
Okay, so existence. Yeah. Okay.
So let me explain.
I'll do it as a piece.
I know what you're doing wrong here, steps, so I can explain it.
Guys, come on.
Here's my first axiom. Axiom A: anything which is true exists, and only things which are true can exist. Right?
That's right.
Axiom B: B does not evaluate to true. Step C: B does not exist.
You just conflated truth. Okay. You just conflated ontic truth and representative truth.
I said it ontologically exists. I already said at the start, B always ontologically exists. Always. Under all circumstances.
Okay, are you ready to hear my answer?
And then, there's a difference between ontological existence and general existence. B always ontologically exists.
That is incorrect,
but unless A is true, B does not generally exist.
There is no distinction between general existence and ontological existence. Ontology is the study of being, generally, right? There is no distinction. Any distinction you think there exists between ontology and generalized existence is not there.
No, but generalized existence is temporal.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. That's why it's called generalized. Generalized.
Okay, so right now, I am standing 1 meter away from my skateboard, right?
Wait a minute, before you go on, let's stop.
That is ontologically true. I take
can we stop for a second?
2 meters away. Is the first statement now ontologically false, or is it still true? Even though, in a temporal sense, it is now false.
No, let's stay with A equals B plus C.
That's the thing. You're wrong. It's not false in a temporal sense, right? It's not representatively consistent.
So I am both 2 meters away and 1 meter away from my skateboard now.
You're just conflating words. It's not representatively consistent. You can't use the words true or false in ontology and use the same words for representative evaluations.
I'm not using them for ontology.
I'm
saying everything always, whether it is true, like whether it evaluates to true, whether it evaluates to false, whether it cannot be evaluated, all of it always ontologically exists. All of it.
There's no other type of existence.
Even stuff that seems incoherent.
What other kind of existence is there apart from ontological existence, Chris?
Evaluatory.
That's not existence. Whether or not something
That's what this is.
no. Whether or not something evaluates to be consistent with the environment has nothing to do with whether or not it exists. Nothing at all.
How do you explain time?
I explain it as a
How do you
dimension of
so I like not
dimension of
ontologically?
physics.
So ontologically it's static. How do you explain
Wait a
the
minute.
fact that it
Can
doesn't
we
appear
stop there?
static without temporal existence?
I've written extensively on this on Quora. I don't know that it would be productive to go into it in voice, right? Because I could just link you to stuff I've put hours of time into where I've talked about this problem.
Yeah, we've also discussed it before, and I don't think that your solution
you guys
actually
hear
solves
me?
the problem.
Yes, we can hear you. Sorry.
Okay, so can I just go to the A equals B plus C? Because that example is what you gave, and
I'm going to butt out for a bit, but Chris, you need to let him finish before you interject, please.
Thank you. So when you describe those three sentences, what you're doing is you're establishing B's relationship to three other A's. You're establishing you're establishing a relationship of B in relation to A and C. So you're establishing relationships, and you're claiming that they're ontological, so that when we understand what the meaning of plus means, that this will actually refer to real numbers. But the fact that you've described the relationships between these already counts as part of a statement of truth in relation to existence.
Yeah, it's an ontological structure.
So, no, when we admitted at the very beginning that all we're doing is projecting signs and projecting that the relations between these signs are have some sort of equivalence with relations between objects in the real world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what this is doing is making relationships between making signs and establishing relationships between those signs which have an equivalence with the real world. And so they've already made statements of truth regardless of the fact of whether you know what B or C is. You already know that A has a relationship with B and C.
And I agree with that.
Yeah. So the way that you're arguing, though, is rhetorical. And the reason I say it's rhetorical is it's not helping you see. You made it sound like you
keep saying it like I'm trying. Sorry to interject again, but you keep saying it like I'm trying to describe objectivity when the whole purpose of this piece is for modeling why time appears and things appear to change for the subject and why things appear to change. Like, it's to model the subjective aspect of existence, because the ontological objective aspect has already been covered. It all exists.
Well, that's not the reason I would give to it, and I don't know why you gave that reason. That I agree with your first proposition that your main task is to establish a bridge between your relative position and the true state of affairs. That means that you also have to be aware of whatever filters you're employing to filter out facts of states of affairs. Right. So if in our debate I would say, I think you filtered out an interesting fact of the state of affairs in the sequence of statements that you made, which I doubt is accidental, then that would be interesting. And that is that you didn't give a structure value, but you gave content value, which is a sort of elementary sort of mistake. I don't know why, and yet I've heard you argue that structure has value. So it actually is a contradiction.
No. Structure is tied to value. Structure is the relationship between values.
Yeah, and it isn't just tied to value. It has an equivalence with the real world. You don't have to have value. You don't have to have the value of structure is a value in itself. That's what I was trying to illustrate by going over those three statements. The structure has value. You created a value structure. Without the values being defined,
I mean,
that doesn't mean that the structure isn't communicating something.
It's definitely
that's
true.
exactly what I'm saying, though. I'm saying these structures I call them metalogical structures.
No, so what
which do not have
Joshua
a
is
distinct
saying,
value. I
what
say
Joshua,
these
wait a minute.
ontologically exist.
What Joshua is saying, right, is that that's not possible because structures in themselves have value, right? That's how you evaluate links between propositions.
That's exactly
Okay,
true.
I've got an example of a mathematical one we use all the time. Please give me the value of pi without giving me the value 1 pi.
0.
Without
I
pinning
said this.
pi,
I said this
without pinning
yesterday.
pi to a discrete value.
The answer is 0. If there are no pi's, then there is 0. That's the answer. If we have no circle and no square to compare, then the difference is
It's
nothing.
a good answer.
I don't agree.
Well, no, it is a good
It's
answer.
a ratio. It's
Come
a
on.
ratio. It's not 0.
Okay, so then it's something as a ratio.
It's a ratio.
And
You
now
can't
have
divide
the
by
thing.
0, dude.
I'm not dividing it by
No,
0.
no,
I'm
no,
saying.
he's not.
If you have a ratio,
wait a minute. Can I just speak for a second?
you're dividing by.
I'm saying, right, a ratio is where you proportion one thing to another, right? And that implies you have one and another thing, Chris. And if you don't have one and another thing, ratio is nothing. There's no ratio because you can't have a ratio between two things that aren't there.
Yeah, and you also can't have a ratio between 0 and 0.
That's not what it means. What it means is that there is no ratio between a non-square and a non-circle. Do you understand that?
Yeah, so the answer is not 0.
No, the answer is 0. 0 is how we represent the lack of something.
Well, you mean like does not exist?
0 is
Matthew's using your own argument against you.
So then you would agree with the point that you disagreed with last time, which is that 0 divided by 0 equals 0.
No, because I think that I don't understand enough about how division works. I'm not dividing anything. I'm saying if we understand pi to be the ratio between a given square and a given circle, right? And we are not given and we're not given a square or a circle, then that ratio must be nothing.
So it's the ratio between the area of the square and the circle, right? And since the number is 0, that means the circle has an area of 0. And the square has an area of 0. So it's the ratio between the area. So it's 0 divided by 0.
No, wait a minute. I'll say yes to that. I'll say, right, that the square has an area of 0, as in it's not there. You can't measure it at all. And so does the
circle has an area of 0.
Yeah.
So it's a ratio between 0 and 0, therefore not 0.
No, that is sophistry.
Yeah, I have to agree.
Dude, I was trying to make the 0 divided by 0 argument like fucking months
ago. It involves a confusion of the words, right? And if you don't understand that, right, then you need to listen more carefully, right? But if you do, it's a sophistry. There's no other way around it, right? What you did with the 0 there is you...
No, you are doing... you are the one that is... You are equivocating 0 and nothing.
No, that's what... 0 is a numeric representation of the absence of
a position.
Nope, of the absence of value.
No. Yeah, a position
which
does not have a value because the position is not defined relative to another position.
Position implies a number line, which is an abstraction that doesn't really exist. Try again.
0 is a point. A point
is
a position.
0 is not a point on a number line. Try again.
0 is the point which defines the position, which is used to define the number line.
I completely disagree
all of it
with
is
that.
Defined relative to 0.
I completely disagree.
You first put a point where you can put 0 wherever the fuck you want on your page, and that will be the origin.
You're misunderstanding what 0 represents. 0 represents the absence of an object. If I say I have 0 coins...
No, it doesn't.
It does. If I say I have 0 coins...
I thought it did. I used to think that. And then I realized it doesn't.
If I say I have 0 coins, what I mean by that is that I don't have any coins.
May I interject, please?
Yes.
Yeah.
In maths, there are different types of zeros. We have the 0 origin, and we have the 0 vector, for example. We have
Matt is talking about the 0 scalar.
Right.
Specifically.
So the 0 scalar is the absence of value. So you have to strictly define it like that.
That is what I said. That is what I said.
That's not what I'm talking about, and that's what I keep trying to say.
No, but you said I'm equivocating between the two when you just admitted they were the same.
I did.
What I heard was Nanoscholar changing the context of the meaning of 0, and it appeared unconscious.
I agree with that. That's what I saw.
This is the definition of using. I've been using this definition of 0 for 2 fucking weeks, dude.
No, that's not what I mean.
Honestly, you are unconsciously changing the context, and that's how you're actually letting your mind lead you in
You think
tautologies that are
I'm
not
not even
fruitful.
sure. I'm not even sure it's like a change of context exactly. It seems like he puts the ideas together, so they're in the same context, and it's like mushed.
No, I heard the definition of zero change
Yes,
in
but
his
I don't.
proposition.
No, I detected the same shift, but I don't think it was in the
The whole
definition.
time, the entire time, I've been saying zero is a point. The only time I've
That's just not
equivocated
true.
between zero was when I said that my God is functionally equivalent to the point zero because
But you
everything is
realize
defined
that
relative
the
to it.
scalar is different than the truth
Wait a minute.
value proposition.
So
Those are two
you.
different.
So wait a minute. Wait a minute. When I
And Matt
say.
was using the
Wait a
scalar,
minute.
yeah, and I was saying don't.
When I say right that no amount of pi equals zero, right? You took that to mean it meant a point on a number line. Is that what you think? Right? I didn't mean the absence of value. No, you knew what the fuck I meant. That's what happened.
No, he didn't really.
Calm
He
down.
confused. I thought he was
Calm down.
confused.
I think that he knew what I meant up until he changed his mind about it.
Well,
No.
I think what happened was Nano was using it a certain way, and then you came along and used it
I started
the
using
other
it a
way.
completely different way.
Yes, no, but he knew what I meant. He has
You were
admitted
saying that my thing was
repeatedly.
wrong because you were using it a
He's
different way.
admitted
And that was,
repeatedly. He's admitted repeatedly. He knew
When
how
you-
I was using it.
Matthew, when you hear the recording, you realize he didn't actually get what you said. He didn't register.
Since then, right, he has successfully explained what I was using, right? So to continue to raise the same objection seems facile, right? Because if you use what definition of zero I'm using to answer the question, it is a coherent answer. There's nothing wrong with my answer.
That's true.
And I don't understand the segue.
Well, I think
because
the idea was because
no, the reason was because so I'm like, okay, I'm using this definition of zero and I'm using it to do this thing, and in your criticism of my idea you use a different definition of zero.
No, he
That was
used the
my-
right
that was-
one.
that
That
was
was
my
the
point.
answer to your question. No,
I
he
used-
actually was. It was a clever answer.
I used the
He
definition of
cleverly
zero.
answered it.
I used the definition of zero that was pertinent to your question about pi. You didn't.
It is. It is. It's pertinent.
that
You can't
that
get
is
away with-
actually true because
I
like
don't agree. I don't agree.
like,
I
so
don't
is pi
think-
value?
I think that the scalar definition of I don't agree that there are even scalars.
That's okay. I
think
don't agree.
I think
I don't
every
agree
element
that
is
there's a
vector
number line.
defined
So
relative to the origin.
I don't agree there's a number line. So we're 1-to-1 on that one, dude.
Yeah, that's true. You're 1-to-1.
Okay, so there has to be something like a pi vector, right?
No, pi is a constant that vectors can relate to.
I see.
It's a ratio, and because it's a ratio, you can argue that it's a thing, and because it can't be resolved, you can argue that it doesn't exist. So they're both true.
Pi is a metalogical structure because it is a relationship between two other things, right?
Yes,
and until you pin the value of the two things it relies on, until those two things are pinned, in this case they are pinned by a single number, but it could be pinned by two numbers.
Okay. Let me explain my answer.
Until those values are pinned, pi does not take on a value.
I agree.
It does take on a value.
Let
It
me
does,
explain-
because it's a ratio, and it's the same problem as the A equals B plus C. You're doing the same thing, and actually what it is
Okay,
it's
what I'm saying
Wait,
is...
can I explain my answer again, right? So here's what it is, right? When you say, can you give me the value of pi without saying 1 pi, right? What 1 pi means is 1 pi translates to the ratio between 1 square and 1 circle, right? And,
yes, you're
and so wait, let me explain my answer. So I say, if I don't have 1 pi, I don't have 1 square and 1 circle. So my answer is thus. An absence of a square and an absence of a circle leads to the absence of the ratio between them, and that is true.
But
Well,
that's not
I have an objection. You can also, I believe, you can also define pi by the relationship between the change of direction between one dimension and another.
I don't use that definition.
Pi comes up a lot.
The way that I understand pi is the ratio between a square and a circle. As far as I understand, there is no other derivation of it. It is considered a transcendental number.
Yes, and what I'm saying is until you pin the values which
To a
pi is
square and a
reliant
circle.
upon.
No, it's not
Until-
true what you're saying. It's not
you
until
pin the
it's
values which
already
pi is
there.
reliant upon, pi doesn't have a value.
It already
so
has
like
a
if-
value because the
No, but
relation
the
has.
thing-
Okay,
No,
okay,
it has
fine.
actually-
Tell me what it is.
Wait a
What
minute.
is-
No,
what's
I
the
agree.
value?
I think I agree, right? It has
What's the value
absence.
of X pi,
Wait,
dude? What's the
no,
value of X pi?
no. You just said, right, until we pin it, it doesn't have a value. That's what zero means, right?
No.
That's what zero means. Yes, the absence of a
Yes.
value. That's what
There's
I
a
was
difference.
saying. That's exactly word for word what I said. I said that pi doesn't have a value if the square and the circle are not there, and you just said the same thing in different words.
That's right.
I don't think it's equivalent to zero.
That
I
was
think
the
that,
exact.
I think
That's not what he's
Recapitulate
you
saying.
cannot say.
Recapitulate our
cannot-
statements. What did you say, and what did I say? Tell me.
I said that it does not have a value.
What did I say?
You said that the value is zero.
Which means in this context that it has absent a value. We agreed
No,
on
I mean-
that already.
No, but again,
He said it that many
I'm not
times.
using the scalar
I don't
definition of value
care.
ever.
You know what I'm using. So listen,
That's
just
right.
translate it. Seriously, just translate
I
it.
can't because that
I
the
don't
thing you
care.
are using
I have
doesn't
rephrased it.
exist.
Chris, I've rephrased it repeatedly, okay? Don't use the word zero. I said the absence of a square and the absence of a circle leads to the logical conclusion that the relationship between them is absent, right? That is what you said also.
No, it means that the relationship is false because the values it is dependent upon do not exist. The metalogical structure ontologically still exists.
I said I don't care about that fluff.
Pi
That is-
ontologically still exists, even if you are not referencing a specific
Please,
square and a
please,
specific circle.
please,
That is all I'm saying.
Please boil down the analytic distinction between what you said and what I said, because I don't think there was one. What
That's
difference?
right.
What
The
difference?
only issue I'm taking is that you keep saying it is equivalent to zero. That's
I
the
didn't
only
say
issue
that.
I have.
I said it once. Right? And then
Yeah,
I.
It was absent of
and I
value.
didn't
He
have
did say
any
that.
issue with anything else you said.
How many times
Okay,
can I say
let's
absent of
wrap it.
value before you hear me?
My fucking god. I agreed with you, and then I added the caveat, even though the relationship does not exist, ontologically it does still exist. That was me agreeing with you.
No, but the point is, when I recapitulated to you, right, that your example was the exact same as mine, you said no again and again.
That's right. You did
I
say
only
no.
said no. I only said no when you said it was equivalent to zero.
What
Insane.
happened there?
Are your veins okay or did off?
False and zero are very different, in my opinion.
Ah,
All right, I think Matt left. He's back.
I don't see.
Are we gonna go back to that topic?
I think we exhausted that one.
Yeah, I definitely think so too.
But like I feel like the argument there really was trying to describe the state of change. If something changes, that means one time it was true and one time it was false. But that is not the case. Things can't be true and false.
It can be true and
Why
false in
not?
different senses or at different times. This is a very common thing, right?
And
The
that's
law
what I
of
was trying to
the law of
describe.
non-contradiction,
That's what
right?
Vivi was saying.
The law of non-contradiction in its full version, Chris, is that two things cannot, like, so something can't be true and false in the same sense at the same time. And the example given by philosophers about this, right, is a spinning top, right? A spinning top is both in motion and at rest along different axes, right? And in that sense, right, it is not breaking the law of non-contradiction because it is true in different senses.
No, but that's why I'm not breaking the law of non-contradiction, in my opinion. I'm not saying A and not A is true. I'm saying A is equal to not A.
I just gave you the explanation.
It's
right?
describing a structure. It's not. It doesn't break the law of non-contradiction, dude.
I just explained, right, why the fact that things seem to change isn't a problem.
Yeah.
And I just described the mechanism that allows them to change. Not only is it not a problem, I just said how.
I described an alternative mechanism, though. So, like, what makes us prefer yours?
Okay, so for you, everything always exists. How is that change?
Change is part of perception, right? It's part of the perspective of being instantiated in limits that you don't quite comprehend.
Right, so it's almost like subjective existence is like different from ontological existence, like I was trying to say earlier.
Almost like that, but not.
Like it's a part of ontological existence.
Yes.
But it is a limited scope, and within that scope, things can appear to change, and the mechanism, I believe, is responsible for that is this constant, which is A equals not
Yes,
A.
but but the thing is, right? You made perfect fucking sense to me last night, Chris. Your issue, as you correctly identified at the end of our conversation last night when you said maybe 0 is false and 1 is true, right, is that you seem to
No,
think,
I don't think that that's actually correct though.
you seem to think, right, that nothingness, absence, 0, you seem to attribute to these things some kind of transcendence which is just inappropriate.
No, but it's not nothingness. 0 isn't synonymous with nothing.
I never said it was
They're
nothingness. It's not nothingness, it's nothing. Because what
No,
nothing
it is definitely a thing. It has
You're not
structure.
listening to me.
It does not have a
It's a
value.
thing.
That is
It's
the
a
difference.
thing. We call the thing nothing. It means the absence of a thing.
No, but in this case, 0 is the only thing which does not have a value that is still considered a thing.
No, not true.
It does have a value.
And it's not even really. No, but it's only if it's defined relative to itself.
Well, what is 0? 0 is
Which is
having
basically what we
this.
do.
No. Well,
0 is defined to the fact of values, right?
0 is having chosen nothing to put in the foreground of consciousness,
Yes,
while
but like
the whole
don't you
universe
contrast-
exists. So
You contrast 0 just with the fact that there are a number of things, right? You can either have a number of things or you don't have the things.
yeah,
Actually,
exactly.
they're both defined relative to each other. So something is the absence, like the not nothing, and then
that's
nothing
not
is
true.
not
That is
nothing.
not true. Something has its own definition. It's not defined as not nothing.
Nothing is the absence of all other things.
No, it isn't.
No,
It's the
that's
not choosing to put in the foreground of consciousness.
nothing specifically.
Anything.
Right?
Yeah,
Nothingness
nothing
is the absence of all things, right? Nothing is the absence of a particular thing which could be present since it exists, but it isn't.
Yeah. That's
So
much more
isn't
like
that what I said?
Not quite, Vivi.
Alright, so I said something is not nothing, but that's not how it's
No.
defined. Correct. I agree.
Yeah. And that was the issue with your utterances.
that's why the circle goes that if you're talking about nothing, you're also talking about everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so wait. In the statement that false means 0.
Yeah.
False is not true, and true is not false.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But false doesn't really correspond to 0 properly, right? Representative. This is the issue Chris is having all along. Representative falsehood and ontological falsehood are completely different. Ontological falsehood isn't a
Doesn't
thing.
exist.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a thing at all.
I 100% agree, and I've always said that.
Then I don't know why you're saying that there are things that have structure but don't exist. That is false.
Yeah.
Oh my fucking god. How many times do I have to say
You keep
every
using-
single time I reference existence and don't explicitly say ontological existence? I don't fucking mean ontological existence.
Are you aware that representative truth is not any kind of existence?
It
That's
is how
not
subjective existence manifests, dude.
No.
It's how the only other type of existence manifests.
Representative truth is different to a kind of existence.
It's like it's more like evaluative truth. As we evaluate the ontological structure, we like this is what manifests.
It seems to me like what you're confused about, right, is that the correspondence is between the word truth and exists, right? Ontic truth is existence, right? And representative.
There is no such
Listen to
thing
me.
as ontic truth.
Listen to
Anytime
me.
I'm talking about
That's
truth,
wrong.
I am
Listen
not
to
talking
me.
about ontic
Listen
truth.
to me. That's wrong. Ontic truth means existence. Representative truth means consistence, or consistency rather, with the actual state of affairs. Get that through your head, right? Representative truth is not existence. That's not what we call it. Nobody other than you has ever referred to something.
I'm referring to subjective existence.
That's not the point. That's not what we're talking about. You're talking about correspondence with actuality. No one calls that existence. Nobody.
Well, the thing is, he's trying to describe change, which is relative.
He's trying to describe
change
right?
only exists in the subjective frame, and the
Okay,
subjective
listen.
frame exists relative to the ontological existence
Okay,
of
how about
everything
this?
that contains.
Listen to me, right? You're saying
Yeah, well,
there's
that's
such a thing as ontological existence and representative existence, and that there's no such thing as ontological truth. I'm saying that there is such a thing as ontological truth.
That's not. I never said that.
You did. I said that there was ontological truth, and you said there's no such thing.
I said
ontic
everything
truth
is ontologically true.
Yes, I said. I used the phrase.
I said there's no such thing as ontologically false. That's what I said.
No, that isn't what you said.
I have always, dude, at no point in the last fucking 5 years have I ever said that anything could ever be ontologically false. Where the fuck did that even come from?
That's not what I said, right? And actually, you said recently, just in this conversation, that you think it makes sense to say something can have structure but not exist.
It does ontologically exist.
That is nonsensical. You are misusing words. There's no such thing as
Okay, so a metalogical structure can ontologically exist, but at the same time not exist within the subjective frame.
Look up the term exist. You don't know what you're saying. Representative truth cannot be called any kind of existence. It is just a mistake.
Okay, so whenever I'm talking about subjective existence, I'll just not use the word existence.
Pardon?
So whenever I'm talking about subjective existence, which is this entire conversation, I'll just not use the word existence.
No, because you're not talking about subjective existence.
Give me an alternative.
You're talking about
that's
subjective
the only
truth.
thing I've been talking about.
You're talking about the subjective truth. That is,
they are directly linked.
No, they're not.
Linked.
The idea
subjective truth and subjective existence are directly linked.
There's no such thing as subjective
existence is which is subjectively true.
There's no such thing as subjective ontology, Chris. That does not exist.
I don't even fucking care anymore, dude. You can have whatever conversation you want.
I think Chris has mentioned that if he doesn't say ontologically true, he doesn't mean ontologically true.
No, but he's not saying true. That's the
I've only
objection.
said it like 30 times.
No, you say ontologically exists. I'm saying, first of all, that's redundant. Ontology already refers to
everything is ontologically true. Everything ontologically exists. Bam, out of the way. We never have to say it ever again.
So can you explain to me?
Easy.
Explain to me why you said. I did.
It's okay.
Okay.
What happened?
He left. That's what happened.
You couldn't know objective truth without any objective false.
No, I don't think you're listening. Objective false literally is objectively false. Are you listening to yourself?
Yeah, does the objective falsity exist?
Like, it's by definition, it is not true. It is objectively
so then
false.
How do you know?
No, of
how do you
course
know
it cannot
what's
exist.
true? How do you know what
the
things
idea
are
of
true?
falsehood exists.
You can't have no true things unless you know that they're not that they're false. They're not false. That's how you know truth.
People created the meaning through stories, and people believed the stories. Therefore, they downloaded the meaning. Okay.
Something. Appeal to people's emotion, isn't it? And people belief, rather than appeal to people's logic and sense of reason.
Oh, their logic and sense of reason,
both.
their epistemology grows from their.
Yeah,
I mean,
I suppose you
how
can
they
do both.
readdress themselves in reality, right?
In a limited fashion.
Yeah, means to light up, to illuminate.
To illuminate?
Yes. So I'm not sure if I said the same thing twice, but there is a difference between those two words.
Definitely. So light, that was the one that you were identifying as being related to it. What was the word that you were talking about to begin with? The angels are made of?
Nur.
Yeah, that's insight.
All right. Yes.
Yeah, I
So-
think that's insight. If
All
what
right.
you're talking about is what allows you to see properly,
Mm-hmm.